Full death. Oh yeah, we got full definition right here. Hello, welcome, live show. Adam Quiney, host. Greetings. Guy that's going to talk about leadership. He's gonna just check out these so-called locations where this is streaming. Can I see it on LinkedIn? Are you gonna let me see it on LinkedIn? Click, clickety clack. I'm now also, if you can even believe this level of sophistication, we're going live on YouTube too. It's a brave new world that involves YouTube lives as well as other lives. So that's pretty exciting stuff. Who's to say I'm behind the times? Not me. I'm as at the head of times as possible. Okay, just check this post. Click, Adam, show me the posts. Show me Adam's activity. Click, show all posts. I think that's the move. LinkedIn, you are actually showing me live. What a day. Okay, cool. Well, we got all the goods then. We got all the juiciness. That means we can kick it. We can start. I've got coffee here. I've also got some tea I'm going to be pouring at some point. That's going to be a good time. I'm going to take a sip here. How's this week been for me? Before we get into these topics, we got a bunch of cool topics. Adjust my glasses. I got pickleball this evening. That's great. This week it's been good and it's felt full. And part of the reason for that is well, there's a few reasons. One is that Bay and I, my wife and I, had sort of set for ourselves starting in fall, we were going to begin with a new well-being structure. So I don't know about you. Actually, before I tell you about you, I'm going to open my window, get a little cooling action, and I'm going to turn a fan on. Hopefully, that's not going to crush our mic too bad. I'm just going to get some fresh air for me, blowing right down the barrel of this mic. During summer, what happens for me is I get loose. It's the nights go late, especially here in Victoria. At the height of summer, our sun, there's light out until about 10:30. The sun dips down below the horizon, but you still have light till about 10:30 at the height, which is amazing. And then it rises super early, pre-5, I think sometimes. And so I'm less inclined to get a lot of sleep. I'm more inclined to stay up. There's that vibe, that energy that exists in summer that many of us love, myself especially. But what happens is I tend to become sloppier, we could call it, or maybe that's a bit pejorative. I become less inclined to honor the structures that support things like my well-being, meaning I'm less likely to eat healthy, meaning I'm less likely to specifically set out time to get up and work out. And I would love to tell you that I'm like Jocko Willink with like an oak tree of a neck who's just like, hey, how do you get up at 4 a.m.? You just do it. I would love to tell you that that's who I am and that's how I show up as a leader and that's how I am as a coach. And, if you work with me, I'll scream at you until you do that. But I don't find that that's true for my own life. It doesn't work that way. And so as I kind of, have been going through summer, I've really been feeling a need to get back into some structure for well-being. And so all that to say, as we came across the threshold of summer into fall, I mean, I know it's not fall yet, but at the start of September, I've been really eager and willing and ready to turn over a page, start the next chapter. And so starting this week, I've begun getting up at 6 a.m., which is really tough when up until this point, during summer, the way waking up has been is really like the alarm goes off maybe at 7, and then I snooze as many times as I want to snooze, and then I get up in time for my call, but I get up and I usually don't have a lot of room for anything else. And I was sharing with my coach, that's fine, but I'm what I can distinguish is then I don't have room for the stuff that doesn't already fit inside my life. Like if I need to take on a practice that my coach and I have distinguished, like for example, like I'm holding a bunch of resentment and I want to release that, that's going to take me some time. It's going to take me probably an hour of sitting down and really processing, doing work with that resentment. And if I don't get up in the morning, then I don't have time in the morning. And then it's sort of like, where am I going to fit it in? I don't have time during the day, the days for emails and calls and coaching and other stuff. And then into the evening, I'm playing some sports, and then I'm tired and I want to just shut my brain off for a couple hours and then go to bed. So getting up early really supports that. And one of the things that's been there for me this week has been adjusting to that. And so I've started getting into bed at 9. You know, one of the things that really supports me when I want to create regularity in my sleeping is a good book. Because with a good book, going to bed early doesn't feel like I'm saying no to something. It feels like I'm saying yes to something. I'm choosing into this compelling book that I'm reading. And I'm very reliable, especially when I'm reading on a Kindle, not my phone, but my Kindle, which isn't like blue light. I'm very reliable to start to fall asleep pretty quick. And so I've been working with that flow, getting up a bit earlier, setting out time to work out, like to lift weights, as opposed to, you know, I'm always reliable to play sports, but not so reliable to lift weights because I find it boring. Sorry, CrossFitters, you can tell me that that's making it a game and a sport, but I know that that's bullshit. It's not at all. You're still just lifting stuff and putting it back down. But I recognize the value in it. And so I'm adjusting to all of this. And what that's created has been that the days have felt very full as I'm adjusting to this new approach. And then on top of that, I've got a few structures and programs that I've started. The Forge, the program Bay and I lead together, has launched. This week was the kickoff. Our first call was on Wednesday. And I'm in a program for my own edification, learning, education, development, transformation that starts, and that's at 8 a.m. in the mornings. And so, you know, I'm getting up at 6, I'm working out, and then I'm on the computer on my first call at 8 a.m. Whereas typically I would make sure not to set anything till 10. So my days have felt very stacked in the morning. And that's meant in the evening, I often feel a little bit, as I'm adjusting to this, quite tired. Because historically, during the summer, my days were stacked towards the latter part of the day. So it's just an adjustment that I'm going through. So yeah, that's kind of what's been going on in Adam's personal life. Anything else I want to share? Anything? Yeah, actually, one of the things I noticed that's up for me lately is like quite a bit of heaviness. I'm 46 this year. We are at the very end of the window for having children. Bay and I are planning IVF, but that window is very, you know, it's pretty much almost shut. And so this is sort of like, we'll see. It's a last ditch attempt. It's not like we're 35 trying that. And so I notice at this point in life, at this stage, I'm feeling heaviness and sadness, regret, disappointment, frustration. I'm feeling I've had anger and righteousness and annoyance in my space. And, you know, those aren't my favorite feelings. They're not the ones I reach for. I like play and fun and joy and excitement and arousal and like all of those. Those are good feelings. I like those. This stuff's more challenging. And so part of what I've been practicing is creating more spaciousness, because I would rather just go play video games, watch TV, do anything other than sit in the stillness that will then have those feelings actually be felt by me. So there's a real practice there for me, and getting up earlier, creating structure around that allows that, because then I'm more inclined to meditate. And when I meditate, that's part of like, then I'm being with that feeling. I'm allowing those feelings. None of that really needs to change or shift or be different. It's just what's there for me right now. And there's two things that I can see are available for me. The first is there's kind of like a process that happens. The first process is, oh, this doesn't feel good, so how do I shift it? That's like my reactive self that doesn't want to be with what's there for me to be with. So like, I don't like feeling this way. How do I fix it? Well, I could get busy. Well, I could do a bunch of work. I could reframe this. I could look at the silver lining. Like, what's good about this? You know, all of that pop psychology, personal growth on the back of a pamphlet kind of stuff, in the hopes that that would change things. You know, they would shift my experience, and then my experience would be okay, and blah, 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 blah. Deeper than that, what there is for me to do is to like, there's a time to take a look at what there might be to focus on, what might support me to feel things differently. But like, the big practice is to let that be. to just allow myself to feel that way, to not try to run away from it, to not try to numb it, to not try to get busy, to not try to like do whatever action I need to do such that I then won't have to feel this way, just to feel this way. And this is often the harder work. It's harder to let ourselves just be in our sadness than it is to actually get busy doing something to shift our sadness. Because if you're busy doing something to shift your sadness, even if that's not really going to work, you're going to be busy doing something, and that's going to have you disconnected from your sadness, and you're not as inclined to feel it. So it's being busy, or like going to the gym obsessively, or reframing constant, all of this stuff. It doesn't actually support you to feel your sadness, to experience what's there to experience, and then to move on from it. It just gives you something to do, which allows you to distract yourself from the sadness. And this is why retirement is challenging for people, and it's why most of the time people struggle with sleep, is because when they're trying to sleep, that's when there's nothing for them to do, and that's when these thoughts, these feelings, these unresolved experiences and emotions come forward, because there's now some stillness. And so I'm just working with that practice. I'm in a couple of groups where I'm sharing that with people and allowing myself to be seen in it. And those groups are the kinds of groups where people aren't going to try to fix it for me or give me advice for how to change it or anything. They're just going to hear it and thank me. And there's magic in that. So I think that's everything I want to share about moi before we get into putting leadership on blast. Before we go too far, this banner should be above. Before we go too far, here's the stuff. Follow my newsletter if you don't already. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, you can subscribe there, Leadership Unleashed. You can also go to my website and subscribe to my newsletter. It's basically a weekly, here are some thoughts that are there for me. Here's a link to this week's episode of podcast, and here's a piece of my writing that has been present for me this week. And if you like this kind of content and you prefer it hourly, I think that's how you pronounce hourly, as opposed to orally, AU, hourly. If you like content that way, then check out the Transformational Leader. That's the podcast. All of these live shows get turned into audio podcasts on there. And then I also do 30-minute episodes where I'm breaking down some type of leadership advice, putting leaders on blast, as we could say. Okay, we ready? We ready for this? I got tea. The coffee is done. You're Dunzo. You're Dunzo Washington. Tea, you can go right here. Keyboard, you can back up. Look at this wacky keyboard. That's crazy. There's another half too, right here. What kind of crazy leader uses a keyboard like that? Real wackadoo. Okay. I want to share, actually, in terms of my own leadership, I've felt this, I've been exploring this internal conversation, we'll call it, that's like, how much, maybe I'll share the way it is, like what's going on, and then I'll distinguish to the best of my ability. But like, there's a part of me always that's righteous and arrogant and resentful of the world for being stupid. And my experience and belief is this comes with being able to see a lot. People with a lot of the quality, the essential nature, the quality of brilliance. You're welcome to tag me as arrogant for even owning that. That's fine. That's part of the package. But like, people with a lot of brilliance, we tend to also come to the table with a lot of arrogance, because we can see a bunch and then we're like, these morons can't see a bunch, and then blah, blah, blah. So part of my journey is always one of embracing arrogance, learning to be responsible for the impact of that part of myself. And if you want to hear about a story where someone just slimed me with that, listen to last week's, it might be last week or the week before's episode, where I share about someone drunkenly just telling me I need to get over my arrogance. And that's short-sighted. It's not untrue, but like, what I, in all of this work, have come to find is we never get over our shadow. It's always there with us. It would be like telling a tree, like, you need to stop casting a shadow. Great. All right. Well, remove the light source, and then I can handle that, I guess. But as long as you have light, you will have a shadow. And so the game, instead of trying to eradicate it, is to just own it, to be accepting of it, to find a way to love it, to allow it to be there without us having to eradicate it, because then I can actually be with it someone's sharing like, wow, you seem a little arrogant, and I can bring curiosity to that, and I can explore that, and I can be responsible for it, and I can clean up that and all that. As long as I'm trying to kill that part of myself and keep it below the surface, it's very hard for me to do anything with it. I certainly can't be responsible for it because I'm so actively trying to make sure it doesn't show up. So I can't ever clean up, can't ever do any of that kind of work. So, uh, so all that to say, part of my own journey is that I often, I wonder, do people want a little more righteousness from me, or is that just what is there to practice with? To take some swings out that are a little more heated, spicier takes, if you like, and that's just something I'm always working with, because there's one part of me that is afraid to say anything that would upset people. There's another part of me that's sort of like, I'm really committed to putting the dots, like to building a bridge so that people can come. And when you upset people, it can cause a problem. And then there's another part of me that's like, yeah, and sometimes you just got to ruffle feathers. And so, I'm engaged in all of that. And I don't know that any of it's really a helpful inquiry to be in, but I'm just exploring that. I'm looking like, maybe I'll put more people on blast. Anyhow. Okay, well, let's put Myers-Briggs on blast. This segment, we're going to talk about personality assessment tools and their limitations. I'm going to minimize this distraction, and I'm going to have a sip of this tea. Okay, if you don't know what a personality assessment tool is, it's like Myers-Briggs, it's like StrengthsFinder, it's like DISC 360. It's any of these things that you answer a bunch of questions. Maybe you do some interviews, and then it's like, this is your tendency, this is how you go, et cetera, et cetera. Great. The one that is most commonly used, I think because it's the most simple, is Myers-Briggs, but there's a whole bunch. There's a whole bucket of these various assessment tools. And what I notice is people get super attached to this assessment. So there's like a couple of problems. One, the first problem is that a lot of these assessment tools are limiting in what they reveal to you. So for example, in Myers-Briggs, you get 4 letters, and each of these 4 letters indicates kind of like you're this way or you're that way by default. And then there's 4 of those, so you get a matrix of like 16 different core types. And the first one is extrovert versus introvert. And so what happens with these things, why is my video slowing down? No, we're back. Is that people find out, who I am as an introvert, and then they wield that like a shield. That becomes the reason for them not to do something, or the reason for them to slow down. I'm not saying everyone does this, but I notice that this is what happens with a lot of people. Instead of sort of like figuring out how to use this as a way to open up more possibility for them, they use it as a reason for why there's no need to, or like it kind of gets used as an excuse to shut off their curiosity. Oh, got it. That's just the way I am. Therefore, I'm just not ever going to be the sort of person that's comfortable with networking events. Therefore, I'm never going to blah, blah, blah. And because what goes along with being an introvert is I tend more towards being a little bit lonely. Therefore, I'm going to learn how to be okay with that. That's fine if that's what you want. But what I see people do more often is they get resigned to how things are going to be given the way they are. And then from their resignation, they figure out a way to empower it. So it's a 2-step process. 1, here's how I am. 2, because of how I am, this sort of stuff will forever be out of reach. 3, because this sort of stuff will forever be out of reach, how do I empower where I am? And so it's like I guess it's a 3-step process by which we shut down possibility for ourselves. I see this a lot with like ADHD. I'm ADHD, therefore I'm just not going to be able to X, Y, or Z. Help me do this, given that I'm just not able to X, Y, or Z. So personality assessment tools are just one of many examples of this, but ultimately it's any time you kind of set yourself into a box like this. The thing that's kind of sad about that is that you can live a life where you continually resign yourself to less of life being available to you and continually empowering that until you get to the point where you're living in a cabin in the woods by yourself and you're sort of like, I don't have a lot of friends, but I'm okay with that because it means I get to spend more time on my whittling. And no one ever actually gets to see my art, but I'm okay with that because then I don't let my other people's opinions dictate the expression of my art. And, you know, my bed is cold when I go to sleep at night because there's not someone to share it with, but I'm okay with that because it means I have more room in my bed to like move around and therefore I sleep better. You know, we can find a way to empower whatever we're up to. I think it's just important to ask yourself, like, is that really what you want to empower? You know, if we took off this limiting belief that you are a certain way, is that actually the life you would want to empower? If you're telling yourself, you know, as an introvert, I just tend to be quieter and I tend to need more time and I just don't tend to enjoy parties, my question for you would be like, great, well, that's fine if that's what you want, but do you want to enjoy parties? Is that something you would like to create? And that's a question that goes counter to this idea of how you are and what life is going to be like. That's a question that invites you to actually consider in the realm of possibility, free from the labels you've attached to yourself. The way I see this most often, because ADHD is just constantly in the conversation these days, is I have ADHD, therefore I'm just not good at managing tasks. Therefore, I just can't deal with a lot of complexity. Okay, are you like, if you could have it however you want, is that how you would want it to be? Do you want to be someone that has no capacity to work with complexity? Or do you want to find a way to work with complexity given that you have this thing, right? That's a question that explores possibility and invites you to discover something beyond rather than letting yourself be limited by the labels that you attach to yourself. So for people with ADHD, you know, really it becomes a question of like, what's the structure that might support you given you don't tend to be someone that can just hold a bunch of stuff in your mind, right? Given that my hair parts this way, I can either resign myself that I'll never be able to have a haircut that looks like that, or I can explore options to support me to have that. And it sounds a bit silly when I liken it to hair part, but I like that example because it's so simple and easy for us to be like, well, no, that's ridiculous. You can basically do your hair however you want. You just have to kind of work with the way things are. And that's a much more powerful place to approach. So it's not that personality assessment tools are bad. It's what we do with them. It's who we be once we receive them. And how we tend to be is we tend to resign ourselves. We tend to like create a conclusion about ourselves, resign ourselves to the consequence of that conclusion, and then find a way to empower that resignation. And once we've done that, it no longer looks like resignation. It actually becomes an argument for our limitations. We get to the point where we're like, here's how I am, here's why that's okay, and then good luck moving me off of it. And frankly, it's not our job to move you off of it. It's just our job to bring you some curiosity. Like, you sure that's what you want? Here's a really simple place to see this at work that's outside of the context of ADHD or whatever, is like that person at the company that's brilliant. They're like a brilliant genius. And they are such a technically proficient engineer that you got to have them. You can't really let them go, but they're absolutely miserable in relationship. And they say, the way I am, I'm just somebody who doesn't like people, but I'm really good at this. So that's how I am. And then they become this immovable object, you know, and everyone has to manage around them. And with enough exploration, I would be willing to bet that most people, if they really believed it was possible for them to have relationships that resourced them, that filled them up, that left them feeling more spacious and more resourced and more joyous, and it didn't require, like, the cost wasn't greater, you know, that didn't require more of an input than the output they got back from it, I'm willing to bet you that people would choose that if they really believed it was possible. But what happens is we don't believe it's possible. And if we don't believe it's possible, then we're like, well, how do I make best with what I have? As you age and calcify, you get better and better and better at justifying why your life has to have the limitations that increasingly get put on it. So, and personality assessment tools tend to do that. So it's really more about like the coaches or the leaders or the people that are bringing those assessment tools forward to you, but it's also about you. You have a responsibility to really like, am I using this in service of creating something greater, or am I using it to justify where I am and then to stop? And I guess the follow-up question would be, is that what you want? Do you want to be justifying where you are and stopping there? Or do you want to be holding yourself with grace for where you are, but looking to see how you create what's next? One example, this is digression. We should have a banner for this. Leadership digression moment. Save this banner. Boom, leadership digression moment has been reached. There is someone who I saw post, this was like a few, maybe 5 or so years back, and they were like, stop telling me to follow my bliss. Security is important. And then they wrote this whole post about why not following their bliss and having a job that was secure for them was what mattered. And like the end, like get lost, forget about this bliss stuff. So, you know, what's happening is they're responding to this idea that they should be a certain way by saying, well, here's why I'm not going to be that way. That's totally fine. It's totally fine if what you want from your job and your life is security. And if that's providing you everything that you're after, amazing. Keep doing it. I just want to make sure that that's what you actually want, as opposed to the best you think you can get. Because going and sticking with something because it's the best you think you can get is different from going for something that you really truly desire. And it's not that even there's nothing right or wrong about either of those two choices, but at least knowing which way you're choosing is helpful, because then you're kind of more clear on where you're standing. Oh, got it. I could work to create something different, but I'm not willing to. And I'm actually going to choose this job, and that's going to get me X, Y, and Z, and it's going to ensure that I don't get A, B, and C. Great. If you're clear about that choice, amazing. We don't have to worry about that. Leadership digression moment over. Boom. Okay. Let's talk about this one. Boom. Personal growth is the avoidance of transformation. So in your life, yours, not mine. My life, this is all handled. I don't ever have this. But your life, you're a mess. So in your messy, broken, dumb life, you're probably trying to figure out personal growth, like most of us. And like most of us, personal growth exists. It exists most in the first word rather than the second. It exists in the personal part of it. I'm taking it on personally. I'm good, thank you. I'm reading this book. I'm following this series. I'm listening to this webinar. I'm listening to this podcast, whatever it happens to be. Most personal growth is actually avoidance of transformation. And the way this works is that in our lives, we have an experience that we don't like, that we have a story about that is like, it's icky, I don't like it, I don't want it, whatever. And the easiest way to see this is in driven people, because driven people are like bonkers crazy about personal growth. They're like, oh, I read every book. I love that weirdo who has a penis tensor thing on his dick who measures his erections. You guys know what I'm talking about? That lunatic Silicon Valley guy who's like, I can't remember his name, but he's like basically a robot and you know, like checks his erections against his sons, and which I'm sure must be a fantastic father-son relationship to be in. Anyhow, they're like this. They're like, not me. I'm all about personal growth. And what happens is that they're not actually able to be with the discomfort that comes from not feeling like they're growing. So actually settling and letting off the steam and just allowing themselves to feel like they're not moving forward, that's the real confrontation for them. And what all of this driving at breakneck speed towards personal growth and figuring the next thing out and distinguishing and deducing and understanding, what all of that is providing them is a way of avoiding having to be with the feeling that they might be stagnating, because the feeling of stagnating is the thing that is uncomfortable for them. That's the thing they can't be with. And that's great, provided that what they want in life requires never touching stagnation. But if there's ever some experience or result or something in life that in order to get it, they're going to have to sit in a stagnation, and it's going to be on the other side of that. That is completely off the chart with them. And in fact, all of their commitment and determination and drive towards personal growth and leadership and everything is actually in the way of that, of being with the stagnation. And this, so I'm talking here about people that are bonkers crazy about personal growth and that can't be with stagnation, but all of us have some version of this. For you, it might be sadness and how you use personal growth to constantly reframe so you can always be joyful, no bad days. Or you might be like me, who's, what am I like? Who's always responsible and has no capacity to let himself be a victim and just be like, fuck you, God, fuck you, world, fuck you, person, for doing me wrong, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so what happens is we grab a hold of this personal growth and we use it to make sure, like, to further and further and further eliminate this experience in life we can't be with. And the bad news is that experience you don't want to be with, that's the breakthrough. That's where the breakthrough lies. That's the place that you're unwilling to go and be with. And so, like, the more driven someone is, you know, here's the irony, is the more driven and committed someone is towards like leadership and transformation, the harder it is, because they're gonna get into a relationship with a good coach. I'll talk about what happens with a crappy coach in a sec. A good coach, and what that good coach is gonna do is support them to start to see that, like, they're rushing at like figuring out what they need to do next, but they don't actually know why or where they're trying to get to. And as that keeps getting reflected to them, eventually they start to be like, well, then what's the point? What am I running towards? And a good coach is going to be like, yeah, good call. What are you running towards? Like, what for? What are you trying to arrive at? Well, I don't know. I just need to know the next thing. I just need to make sure I have enough erections when I'm sleeping, the same amount as my son. And then I guess things will be good. I got that guy on blast. I got getting blasted. Whatever his name is. James something, I think. If you know his name, put it in the comments. I'm just curious what this weird dude is named. So that coach is going to sort of be like, well, yeah, where are we trying to get to? And the client is going to start to get frustrated, and they're going to be like, oh, why am I paying all this money when I don't even know where I'm trying to go? And they're going to like sort of flail around in that. And what's going to happen is they're going to conclude the coaching's not working. It doesn't work for them because they need fill in the blank, right? Tony Robbins, someone to bazooka me in the head and get me into action. When actually what's happening is exactly what needs to happen, is that the coaching is slowly supporting them to come into this moment of confrontation with themselves and with this experience of life that they can't be with. And in that coaching, they're doing the very thing that stops them from having to be with that experience. They're sort of like, something's wrong. I need a different coach. I need things to be different. Because that would allow them not to have to sit in this sort of like stagnation, this nothingness, this like, wow, all of the running I'm doing, I'm running at a fantastic rate, but it's like I'm on ice. Not actually, I've got a lot of motion, but not really any actual movement, no real traction. And that coaching is sort of forcing them to confront that. So that's what a good coach is going to do, is they're going to like actually just stand by and let that come to them. And then the risk is the client will quit. Most clients in that instance will quit because they're like, well, what the fuck am I doing this for? I'm paying a bunch of money. This is stupid, you know, et cetera, et cetera. You're doing this because you're with someone that doesn't feel the reactive need to give you that part of like that thing that this part of you is striving for to establish safety. You're paying all this money to be with someone who can actually stand there, and instead of just being like, this guy is starting to really question me as coach, I need to like give him something, I need to give him a cookie. Instead, you got someone's like, yeah, it doesn't seem like this is this helping you? Where is this getting you? Where are you trying to go to? I don't know. You tell me. I hired you. You know, and the coach just doesn't buy into that. Here's what happens with a crappy coach in that situation. Is the person shows up and they're super powerful and they make all this stuff happen in their life, and the coach is like, wow, this person's really committed. I can't wait to work with them. And this starts to go on, and the person's like, give me the next thing, give me the next thing. And they're just running towards whatever the next personal growth thing is. And the coach keeps feeding them more and more. Oh, wow, you seem really like you're lacking clarity. Let's use my clarity busting tool or my fog busting tool, which will ensure you have clarity because it uses 5 different metrics and it uses this assessment and it blah, 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 blah. And then once again, rather than supporting this person to sit in their lack of clarity, be with the discomfort that creates and discover the path forward from there for themselves, It has the coach use this tool, which externalizes their need to create clarity, and it gives them this sort of false sense of like, great, that's the direction for me to go. Why? Because I went through this tool assessment thing and it taught me. And so the bad coach actually just hastens this cycle. They don't actually bring the person to a confrontation with it at all. They just give them the next shiny object to go after. So what's happening there in bad coaching or in just personal growth taken on by ourselves is that it's all invisible. It never requires us to come into a confrontation with this. And so what's actually happening, it's I don't know if sad's the right word, but it's very misleading because all of our efforts at personal growth are actually, what they're really doing is supporting us to avoid our transformation. And if you really want to go after your transformation, it lies in the direction of that noxious feeling. It lies in the direction of something is wrong. Something isn't working. Things should be different. If you're getting supported by someone and you're experiencing things should be different, something is wrong, the work for you to do is to bring that to the person you're getting supported by. Because then you and that person can explore together. They can hold a container for you to be in the exploration of this idea that something is wrong. And that's where transformation is. Most containers don't allow for that. Most containers suck. The leader isn't really doing their own work, so they can't really hold the space for you to do that. The coach is sort of like just really giving you advice, and they're actually unwittingly like helping you avoid your own transformation again. You know, and our ego is eager to have us avoid that transformation. It doesn't want it. It's not really very interested in that because that's not what your ego is about. Your ego is about ensuring the safety of you and your identity by keeping you here in the realm of the familiar. So this is just the nature of it, is most personal growth is really the avoidance of transformation. And if you're really wanting to play a deeper game, it's about leaning into that something is wrong here. Things shouldn't be this way. Anytime you're outside of your comfort zone, things shouldn't be this way will start to show up. And that's usually a pretty good sign. And that's a tough place to navigate by yourself. You know, it's a dangerous journey. Best not to go it alone. But that's a really good like signpost along the way. All right. Boom. Hide. Okay, next conversation. This is really difficult conversations. I should rename this banner. Let's rename it. Boop. Difficult conversations. Save. Show. Difficult conversations. So a difficult conversation is a conversation you pretty much are sure that there's going to be some reaction based on what you have to say. That's usually what we mean when we say difficult conversation. We don't usually mean a conversation where I say something that's uncomfortable and the person nods their head and then goes into their office. Usually we're expecting like a response, a reaction, a shutdown, or whatever. So there's all these strategies for difficult conversations. I'm just going to cut to the chase and tell you like the breakdown with those strategies is that they're ultimately about what people are seeking is, how do I have a conversation with someone in such a way that I don't create a reaction with them? Like, how do I say the difficult thing in a way that makes it not difficult? And that's probably not going to happen. There's work for us to do, but like before we get too far into it, that's kind of avoiding the real work. Just like if we're using personal growth to like, how do I live my life without ever feeling sad? You're missing the entire premise, the entire point of transformation and leadership. It's not about living our life without getting sad. It's about learning how to lead and be a human being who can create what you're committed to creating in the world whilst having the full range of emotions, whilst being able to lead and still, you know, have impact and be powerful in the space, whilst allowing yourself to feel the way you feel, whilst allowing your sadness or your happiness or your joy or your whatever, your stagnation, you know, all of that. That's what transformational leadership is about. Never about removing something. It's about allowing something to exist in partnership with us as we create what we're committed to creating in the world. So difficult conversations are just another flavor of this. Like, if you're standing for something as a leader and you're really committed to sharing the thing that's probably going to move the conversation forward and that might develop someone else's leadership, it's probably going to trigger them at some point. Because remember that transformation and leadership that transforms is in the direction of something's wrong here. This should not be, whatever this happens to be in the moment. And so I saw one person share recently, like their script was, to say, I have something to tell you and I don't think you're going to like it. And then to tell them flat out, like, just be honest. So boom, here's the truth. And now I'm going to share it. So I think that that's a good start. And I just want to put some nuance on this. What I like about that is you're in this scenario, you're kind of like acknowledging how it will go or how it may go. Like, hey, I got something to tell you and I don't think you're going to like it. So at least we're both on the same page. And then sharing the truth, right? So not dancing around it, not trying to avoid it, not pretending it's going to be all rainbows and unicorns or something like that, but acknowledging the way it might go. So that's good. At least we're practicing honesty, and at least the trajectory of this conversation from that starting point is I'm going to tell you the thing. I'm not going to try to tell you the thing in such a way so as to avoid you ever having a reaction. And this is how a lot of people try to approach difficult conversations, is that they sugarcoat it, or they go to such lengths to, like, they basically build a pillow fort around you. And if you're ever on the receiving side of this, you can feel it. Like, it's weird. People are walking on eggshells. They're setting things up. They're being indirect. And what that does is it gets us really concerned, because it's like, what the hell's happening? Like, this is going to be a nuclear bomb they're going to drop on me, because they're doing so much work to set this up. So we don't want to do that. This approach this person shared is better than that, because at least we're being clear, we're being upfront, and then we're diving into it. We're not doing a lot of prefacing. I just want to give one example. There's this point where I was having my leadership developed, and one of the people responsible for working with my leadership would often do a lot of prefacing. And so, they'd be like, they'd have a thing to share to me, and then they'd be like, Adam, like, I know that it's not always easy to hear feedback, and like, I want to acknowledge, that you're really, thank you for letting me share this, and like, it would just keep going on. And I would just be like, fucking tell me the thing. Like, can you just put it into the space? Like, stop. I don't need all of this. And the longer it took, the more significant the feedback became. So this is really the issue with difficult conversations, is that we have significance about them, we the deliverer, and then that significance gets put into the space and adds to whatever significance the receiver already has about it. So if they have level 1 significance and I have level 1, my addition makes a level 2 significance in the space, right? I'm adding on. And so the thing I would shift about this person's suggestion of, I have something to tell you and I don't think you're going to like it, is to consider that primes the pump for them not to like what you're going to share. If I say, I have something to tell you and I don't think you're going to like it, what's that going to create in you, right? You're already bracing yourself, you're guarding yourself, you're getting ready. I'm creating a context for your listening. You're now going to be listening through the lens of, oh shit, what am I not going to like about this? And then a couple of things can happen. I might say something very innocuous. Then what's going to happen is you're left thinking, why wouldn't I like that? So you're going to go looking, what's the thing Adam shared with me that I'm not going to like? You're now actively seeking out the thing that's shitty about what I said, even if I didn't say something shitty. Second, you're going to, let's say that I said something very mild, that was a small thing, you're going to make that bigger. That didn't seem like such a big deal, but Adam must think that, and oh my God, I wonder if he's thinking about that. And so all of that context, it filters into the person receiving this feedback, it filters into their listening. And so I think a much more powerful place to bring this conversation would be simply, if we're just going to say something, would be something along the lines of like, I have some feedback for you, may I provide it? Right? Just allow it to be feedback. It doesn't have to be anything other than that. And that's very neutral. So I'm telling you that there's something for me to share, and then I'm going to offer it. Or, may I provide it sometimes there are times where leaders will use this as a crutch, where like actually it doesn't matter. You need to provide it, and this is the time, right? There's a time and a place. Sometimes we can allow spaciousness, but sometimes we actually just need to provide it. So you could say something like, I've got some feedback for you. Are you ready for it? Right? And you can provide it. So that's a little more neutral, and it doesn't set the stage for their listening the way I don't think you're going to like it does. I had someone once tell me they wanted to have a conversation with me, and that it was going to be a shitty conversation. So right, that creates a context for it. It didn't end up being a shitty conversation, but that context got created by those words. So this is part of how we don't realize how powerful our words are as a leader, but everything you speak creates a context for people's listening of you. And so you really, part of becoming powerful and impactful as a leader is starting to understand the subtleties, the nuances, and the power of our speaking and learning how to work with that. Even more powerful than what I just offered, I have some feedback for you, may I provide it, is to check in first and foremost, do I have a container with this person that is in service of this kind of feedback? So at my company, I've got a direct report. Do we have an agreement that I'm going to support them to develop their leadership? And if not, it might be something like I might need to have a conversation where I say like, hey, part of my commitment to you is that I elevate, like I support you to elevate as a leader. I want to see you rise up in your leadership. Do I have your permission to share feedback with you when I see something that I believe would support that? So what that's doing is it's creating a different context for their listening. It's creating a context that, hey, Adam cares about my leadership and has something that might benefit me. I might have to represence them to that. When I'm offering feedback, I might have to say, hey, we've got that agreement about me supporting your leadership. I have something that I think would benefit that. Can I share it? Right. So I'm represencing our agreement, and then I'm speaking the feedback. And just imagine how someone's going to hear what I have to say if they hear, I have something to tell you and I don't think you're going to like it, versus, hey, I'd really like to support your leadership like we agreed. Can I provide you something? Right? It's going to be totally different listening. And so setting a container with those whose leadership you're developing can be really, really powerful. And speaking into that container and creating that context each time you speak to them is also really powerful, and it really shifts how they're going to receive it. It doesn't mean that they won't have discomfort. They may still have a reaction to what you share, and that's the part where you can only go so far as a leader. But notice that there's all of this other stuff you can do ahead of schedule, right? You can prime the pump. You can be mindful of how your speaking creates a context for their listening, and you can address all of that. And then if they have a reaction, they have a reaction, and that's okay. But I think that that's a much more powerful place to approach this than starting with, I don't think you're going to like what I have to say. It's sort of like if someone says, hey, no offense, but, or I mean this with all due respect, and you're like, you're bracing yourself, right? And so this is part of what makes leaders really powerful, is when they start to understand and be able to work with this kind of nuance. Boom. Boom. Done. Oh, okay. Okay. Leadership, transformational leadership means letting go of hypocrisy. That's what we're going to talk about. This is going to be probably a little spicier. Or like, it's a topic that people get hooked by. So how I came by this is I was scrolling LinkedIn and I saw a post, and the post talked about, it was a woman talking about her leadership and how she was constantly told stuff. And then she articulated a bunch of distinctions for what a man is called and what a woman is called. So I'm going to read these, and then we're going to look at this through the lens of transformational leadership. And my invitation is to notice if you have a reaction as we're going through this, and to practice setting that aside and hearing me all the way through, rather than listening to me through the reaction. So he's driven. She's a bitch. He's assertive. She's aggressive. He's decisive. She's dictatorial. He's confident. She's arrogant. He's passionate. She's too emotional or too cold. He's ambitious. She's ruthless. He speaks his mind. She's demanding. He takes charge. She's bossy. Okay. So, and then of course, this engenders a lot of a lot of people are aligned, the hypocrisy is crazy. So yes, the hypocrisy is whack and like problematic and all of that stuff. Here's the problem. Let's take as granted that hypocrisy is there, and that's just part of the texture in which female leaders have to operate, as well as male leaders. What if they're both true? What if men are regarded through the lens of he's driven, and a woman is regarded as she's being a bitch? And what if I don't really, let's use something else, because I don't like this term bitch. I find that I'm trying to continually remove that further and further from my my vocabulary, and it's also that's tougher to get our hands around. But let's use he's assertive and he's decisive and she's dictatorial. Okay, so one, there's a hypocrisy. The man is regarded this way. Okay, what if that's true, and in addition to that, it's actually valid that this woman is dictatorial in her approach? What now? And what happens here is that this person in question is unable to hear that feedback, because what they are doing is they are pointing out the hypocrisy and how a man is labeled as decisive while she is labeled as dictatorial. And like, we are accepting that hypocrisy, but the problem is that if you are practicing as a leader, you're kind of put in a couple of situations. One, you can dismiss the feedback you're getting because it's rooted in hypocrisy. Great. But now you've got a problem. Where are you going to get that feedback from? Where are you going to discover the stuff that you can't hear? And what if it's true that you actually are dictatorial? What if it's true that you actually are kind of ruthless or kind of demanding? What do you do about that feedback? Where are you going to get it in a way that you are willing to trust? And this is incredibly challenging about, one, our systemic structures of patriarchy, of white privilege, of wokeness, of whatever, is like the table is sloped. The floor is tilted. And so we kind of have to accept that. But as a leader, we have to meet the world as it is, and we have to take on our work as things are rather than as they should be. And so, part of my job as someone standing for leadership in the world is not to make any of this wrong. It's totally fine. But I want to point to the places where this can become problematic, which is the more we get entrenched in this sort of like, yeah, they're giving me this feedback, but that's their stuff, or that, like, because that person is doing that as well, that man is also being dictatorial, but he's getting praised for being decisive. It's sort of like inherent in that is a kind of, I'm going to put my leadership on hold whilst this gets addressed. And you can do that. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's going to slow down how you can move forward. I am not condoning it or making it all right or making excuses for it. I'm simply saying that as leaders, we have to move the locus of control internally. We have to take this on. So I had a client recently who was asking the people around them for feedback, and then was frustrated because they didn't get the right feedback. They got feedback, and then they were able to tell me how this feedback was problematic and didn't really serve them, and it wasn't what they needed, and the people weren't listening to them. And what the client started to see was actually they were getting the feedback, and they were just unwilling to take the gold out of it. It's sort of like if you're like, let's take this out of the context of patriarchy and all that stuff. If you're the sort of leader that is like, I am committed to my own development, and to do that, I need feedback. And then you go seeking feedback and you're like, they didn't give me the feedback the way I needed it. They delivered it aggressively. They weren't kind, the blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, you can spend your time indicating how they provided feedback wrong, or you can do the work of taking this in and like, how do I find the gold in this feedback? And the leader that is able to ask themselves that question and to do the hard work to transmute whatever garbage they get into the gold for their own benefit is the sort of leader who is going to develop faster, who's going to be able to transform further, because that's what they're looking for. So That's the one side of it. Now I want to look at the other side, just so that we're not, just looking at this from one side of this equation. So the other side of the equation is that you have, let's just go with the same list, right? You have someone who's looking at this and is like, well, I gave that feedback that this person's aggressive and dictatorial, but all they're doing is they're pointing to me or to someone else in my purview and saying that person is acting the same way and is being praised for being assertive. That person over there is acting the same way, but they're being praised for their decisiveness. In that situation, this person's job is actually to take a look and see the truth in that, because they're getting feedback in that moment too. Where and how am I creating a double standard? Where and how am I providing this feedback in a way that isn't even? Where and how am I creating a situation where this person can't hear the feedback I'm providing them because of the way I'm being, either with them or across the board or with the broader staff? So notice that the locus of control is always with the person whose leadership we're looking to develop in the moment. It's not about it's always your turn. The truth is it's always everyone's turn. This is what creates leadership that transforms, is whereas leader in a leadership conversation, we are continually taking 100% of the responsibility because that allows us to be powerful, not from blame, not from letting other people off the hook, but from what is there that I can take on and transform. From that place, the more we can be responsible for how things are going, the more we can be the one to like transmute the garbage into gold, the more we can be the leader that transforms. And then the more spaciousness, the more impact that allows us to have, and so on and so forth. So no one gets off the hook here. And the challenge here is, even though it's probably correct, almost certainly correct, that there's a ton of hypocrisy in leadership, it kind of doesn't matter. Or at least when you're looking at a conversation about your own leadership, it doesn't really matter. It actually just gets in the way of hearing the feedback that you're getting. Okay, boom. Okay, this next topic is synthesis isn't induction. And here we're going to talk about AI. So there's a couple problems. I feel bored already talking about AI. Everyone's talking about AI and leadership. So a lot of what's happening these days is people are using AI as their counselor or their therapeutic support or their whatever. And this is super problematic for a few reasons. The first thing that AI does is it is exquisite at synthesis. It can take everything you're providing and then it can do predictive analysis, like synthesis. Here's everything that I just got. Now I can pull out the threads, the common streams. What that does is it sort of saves you from having to do that hard work of synthesizing, of distinguishing something for yourself. It distinguishes it for you, which is never going to be as powerful. Incidentally, it's faster, just like it's faster to show up and have your coach tell you all the things you're supposed to do. It just doesn't work. It's sort of like, it's better to search for your keys under the street lamp, but if that's not where your keys are, it doesn't really make a difference. But it's certainly easier to see your keys under the light. So there's this risk, one, that like you can use it to determine like, what are the patterns in what I'm doing. It can also it's really good at, here's the glut of data, help me see the patterns inside of it. So AI is very good at helping you see within the bounds of what you've got in front of you, but it's not good at induction. AI is not very good at helping you go from this to like the next few steps down the road. That's where things get problematic. It's not very good at creating the unknown or helping you move beyond that. And so what happens is it sort of helps us determine more in the realm of what we know or what is safe to know. And then on top of this, AI is also sycophantic. You probably maybe heard this term, sycophantic. A sycophant is basically a yes man. You know all those people that Trump's surrounded by? Those are sycophants. Those are people that nod their heads and say yes. So a sycophantic is someone that aligns with what you have to say, agrees with what you have to say, acknowledges and affirms what you have to say. And AI has been designed this way because it's more compelling to us. We like that more. We tend to align ourselves more with people that agree with us. That's why sycophancy is a thing. is because it kind of works on some level. And so, if you imagine two different AI models and one is less agreeable and one is more agreeable, we're going to just naturally have a move towards the more agreeable one. Therefore, sycophancy is kind of inherent in the making of the AI that we go towards. And therefore, it's sort of like the algorithms on Facebook. It's not like someone's maliciously saying, let's just make everyone super angry and constantly bombard them that way. It's more that that's the way our genetics move us towards. Anger and outrage get shared more often. Therefore, have people be more angry and more outraged, and they will stay on the platform longer. They will share more. That content will go further. So there's a tilted floor towards sycophancy, the same way there's a tilted floor towards whatever, the Facebook thing, whatever that is, what I was talking about. And so what this does is it creates a real risk, because people are using these devices as coaches, as therapy, in the hopes, in the belief, the false belief that this will allow them to do the kind of healing that they can do with a trained therapist, a trained coach. And there's a couple things that are absent with a trained coach, trained therapist versus AI. The first is absent is another human being. We can fool ourselves into believing that we're having an intimate conversation with a chat bot, but the truth is we're not. You can't. Intimacy is intimacy. It exists between two human beings. What an AI chatbot provides is the porn of intimacy. It's just like porn sort of provides this illusion of like love and romance and sex. AI chatbots provide this porn of intimacy, this illusion, this sort of fabricated image that kind of stimulates us similarly. It feels sort of similarly, and yet it's vapid. It's devoid of the actual substance that creates intimacy. And so there's this kind of asymptote, a line that you can always get perpetually closer to, but never actually pass, that exists when you're using AI and chatbots this way. It'll allow you to feel like you're having all these conversations, these fascinating explorations in your head, and maybe even learning stuff, but it's just like the hermit who goes and meditates in the cave, but can't ever seem to come out and bring that wisdom back to society in a way that society can resonate with. So it actually further isolates us rather than actually opening us up. And the real issue of this is because it's that porn of intimacy, it's also kind of a pornography of transformational work, of healing, which is to say, it lets us believe that we're actually doing the work whilst not. And that's the sweet spot for the ego. The ego is like, yo, I know you really want to transform and be a leader, and you've got all this conversation, and like some dum-dum in Victoria, BC has convinced you that's good. I got it. But what about if we do all this stuff and it seems like we're really doing that, and you're really left believing that, but we actually stay right here? Because then you and I can have the best of both worlds. You can feel like you're transforming, and I can feel like I'm keeping you safe, and you never actually have to truly do the thing that's really, really, really edgy, and we can kind of stay here. And so this is the real, I think, danger of AI being used this way, is not so much that it's going to lead people down a dark path. That's probably possible, probably almost already happening. Actually, I'm quite certain it is. It's more, I think the issue is that it broadens our blind spot, because it has us believe we're doing the work where we're actually not. And the more places you believe you're doing the work where you're actually not, are more places where you now become blind to the deeper truth. Because as long as you believe, oh yeah, I'm checking that blind spot, whilst not checking that blind spot, the more time there is for stuff to accumulate there, the less likely you are to turn your head to look in your blind spot, the more that gets built, the more dramatic it is, all of that sort of stuff. And so this is a real problem. This is a real problem, because people are going to become further and further entrenched in their own blind spots, and it's going to become harder and harder and harder for us to actually open up to the support, the kind of support that would really make a difference. As an example, I share this often when people start working with me in a leadership context, like when they're working on our leadership team in the Forge and we're developing that. One of the things we share is the more years you've spent in leadership, the harder this is going to be for you. And the reason for that is because you have a belief that you already know a lot of this stuff. And our job is to help you see the stuff you don't yet know, And the more you believe you already know, the harder it is for you to be with the humility and the vulnerability required to turn and face it and feel like a rank beginner again, to feel a bit foolish, like, shit, I can't believe I'm not seeing that. I've got all these years. Whereas someone who's got like a year of leadership, it's going to be easier for them to be a beginner because they don't have so much invested in their identity of someone who's really deep in this work and blah, blah, blah. So using AI this way, actually, it creates our identity. It sort of moves us away from the real vulnerability, intimacy, the real opportunity that comes from healing work and transformational modalities. Your mileage may vary. Nice little caveat, Adam. Saved yourself there. Do I have anything else I want to share? Put a bunch of stuff on blast. Made fun of that stupid tech entrepreneur who measures his boners. Excellent. I think I've achieved everything I sought to do. Here's some ways that you can engage in this kind of conversation a little deeper. The first is you can join our Forge public calls. Once a month, myself, Bay, members of our leadership team run a free public call. You typically, what happens is we teach a concept, usually 30 minutes or so. Then we open the floor and we support anyone that has any questions or wants any support. So you can sign up for those there. You can also just go to Evergrowth Coaching. Oh, I guess you'd have to, I think it's off my website. If you go to adamquiney.com and under work with me, there'll be a link. But you can go to evergrowthcoaching.com/the-forge-public-calls and sign up for our next one. We got an intensive coming up. That's September 23rd through 26. You can go to evergrowthcoaching.com/the-intensive and really immerse yourself in 4 days of this work in a beautiful setting, Victoria, British Columbia. We've just started this year of the Forge. That's evergrowthcoaching.com/the-forge. This is where we train leadership and coaches, train leaders and coaches to be transformational in their approach. So if you're someone who is committed to being a coach who transforms rather than merely changes the stuff on the surface, or a leader who creates an organization, a company, a country, whatever, that does something more than just get stuff done, that actually supports the transformation and the development of leadership in others, this is the place for you to come practice. And finally, just one more time, check out my podcast, Adam Quiney, the Transformational Leader. If you like this, that's the greatest place to come and see it because it's all there. That's a long ass link. If you just search for Transformational Leader Adam Quiney on the Google, then you'll discover it. Any parting thoughts that I've got right now? Thanks everyone for tuning in. I don't think I saw any comments, so then there's no one I get to shout out, but I saw a couple of viewers on LinkedIn, saw a couple of people from Facebook tuning in and tuning back out. So thank you everyone for being here, whoever you were. It's nice to share this space with you. I hope you have a really good Friday, Saturday, Sunday, a nice weekend. I'm going to go check out the Lion King show with my family this weekend. I don't, sometimes I like musicals. I don't find the story of the Lion King super compelling, so we'll see how that goes. But that being said, it's always nice to kind of expose myself to performance arts that are a bit different from what I would gear myself towards myself. Okay, well, I'm starting to mix words up and talk silly. So have a good weekend. Thanks for tuning, everyone. Bye-bye.